with a crucial official visit weekend for the Oklahoma Sooners. And I say crucial because you get an opportunity to get a guy like Williams Nwaneri on campus without any other defensive lineman on campus. So Miguel Chavis and Todd Bates are able to really just spend that one-on-one time and continue to build that relationship and show him how much he matters to them. That's why it's crucial. And today we got to talk about exactly why the Oklahoma Sooners need to land Williams Nwaneri and potentially some of these future casts and crystal balls and RPMs that you've seen roll through over the past, I would say, 24 hours for specific recruits that might or might not be at the OV weekend for the Oklahoma Sooners. But guys, before we dive into it, go ahead, jump down in the comments below and let me know what y'all's thoughts are. Do you think Williams Nwaneri will end up being in the class for the Oklahoma Sooners in 2024? So, Williams Nwaneri is on campus. Now, I'm going to just be honest here. I don't have a lot of information about how this visit is going. I've texted a couple people. I've asked around, so I'm currently waiting on some stuff to come back to me. But from what I've gathered so far from one person, sounds like he's having a lot of fun. Once again, sounds like this visit could go a long way with the Sooners trying to position themselves for the top. I mean, he's a top 3 player in the 247 composite. So a top 3 player in the 247 composite rankings. And when you look at exactly why the Oklahoma Sooners need to get a guy like Williams Nwaneri, it's not because your class only has, 7 guys in it, 6 or 7 guys in it so far. That's not the reason. The reason is when you look at what Oklahoma is going to be losing on the defensive line and losing at the edge position this offseason, you really need to be able to start replacing that with top tier, 5-star, high end, 4-star talent. And I say that because I think this is Reggie Grimes last year. He's a senior. And I think this is his COVID senior year, if I remember correctly. So potentially, somebody correct me if I'm wrong. Chat's usually able to jump on that, but potentially losing Reggie Grimes. Now, you're going to be returning guys like R. Mason Thomas and Dasan McCullough and PJ Adebayor, which is great. Got a young core there. But you're losing a guy like Trace Ford, who you brought in through the transfer portal. A lot of us have talked about it, but maybe Ethan Downs would be better suited if we shifted him to the inside. So maybe you see the staff try to do something like that mid-year into next year. Not sure. Don't have any sources on that, but I'm just saying that would be interesting. Then you've got Rondell Bothroyd, a guy that we expect to just be a force for Oklahoma. He's going to be leaving. So you're going to have a couple holes at edge that you want to be able to really fill. And I think landing a guy like Nwaneri, who is versatile to play either the interior or the edge, I think would go a long way for Oklahoma, because then you would get 2 guys in PJ Adebayor and Williams Nwaneri who, listen, they're tall, they're lengthy. You could put them on both ends, and then you could run just 3 interior guys. And that would be pretty hard to deal with for an opposing offense. And so when you look at what we have potentially in this class for the edge position, and this is where I'm going to start kind of shifting into the future cast. You've seen Parker Thune, and I'm not sure if Brandon Drum submitted one yesterday or not, but you saw the feature cast come in for Jason Ross, the 6'4", 220-pound edge rusher out of Liberty North, Kansas City, Missouri. Now, we know that Oklahoma wants to make a priority of recruiting Missouri and Kansas, mainly because they're right in your backyard. I think when I drive to go see family in Springfield, it's like a 5-hour drive. So it's a very doable drive for anybody's family. So you need to be able to land these kids, right? You need to be able to go into Kansas City and Missouri. Well, I say Kansas City, Kansas or Missouri. And you need to be able to make your presence known that Oklahoma is there, and Oklahoma is there to take the recruits from the local state schools, Kansas State, Kansas, and Mizzou. And so you look at Jason Ross's offers, 20 overall offers, probably some of the most notable ones that I would say Oklahoma is competing with: Arkansas, Kansas State, you've got Michigan in there, you have Missouri, Notre Dame, Penn State, Tennessee, USC. So the kid's got some pretty elite offers outside of Oklahoma. This isn't just some kid that OU offered in the Kansas City area to try to really boost their presence out there. Like, the kid can play, the kid can ball. And so you look at what Jason Ross could potentially provide for Oklahoma. Well, again, he's kind of talented. I mean, he's a top 285 in the 247 composite rankings. I believe he's according to 247, he's a 3-star, number 31 overall edge, but the composite rankings have him number 21. So Jason Ross at 6'4", he's going to have a little bit of that length, but definitely could provide some much needed depth, some young experienced, or I'm not going to say experience, but some young depth coming into the SEC. So maybe your second or third year, you've got a nice experienced room. You're not having to rely on taking 2 or 3 guys. Maybe at the edge position, you can go after one really good, solid piece that year. And then maybe every 3 years, you've got to go after maybe 2 or 3 pieces to kind of replenish what you were losing in that locker room. But the Oklahoma Sooners, I think, have positioned themselves really well, especially for the defensive line. I think one thing that we've seen this year on the recruiting trail is it feels like Oklahoma is trying to really position themselves better than they ever have to try to land some of these top-tier defensive linemen in this class. Because that's something we haven't seen Oklahoma do in a long time. Now, I get it. Well, Lincoln Riley was here. He got a commitment from Gabriel Brownlow Dindy, who ultimately ended up decommitting and going to Texas A&M. But that's not what I'm getting at. When you look at the guys that Oklahoma is in, like, the running with, it's Williams Nwaneri, David Stone. You had Edric Houston on campus, which I think bigger than what people realize, because Edric Houston wasn't a guy that was giving Oklahoma a look. Then you had Dominic McKinley, who's coming for an OV. You know, they've thrown offers out to Aiden Breenland, Kamarian Franklin. You have Joseph Jonah Ajonye, who you're potentially just down to the final 2 of Georgia and Oklahoma there. Now, it looks like it's leaning Oklahoma, but I want you guys to understand, when you look at who Oklahoma is really in favor for, out of the top 11, they've got, let's see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 defensive linemen out of the top 11 that you would feel like Oklahoma has positioned themselves well for, at least made a good enough pitch to put Oklahoma in consideration for that kid's recruitment. And I think that's saying something, because after last season, Brent Venables, Todd Bates, Miguel Chavis, they had to sit down. They had to have a realistic heart-to-heart and say, we're not good enough at this position. This is a position that we're going to have to improve in to get this team to improve. And ultimately, you see it on the recruiting trail. You see how they're prioritizing this specific area of the defense for the Oklahoma Sooners. And going into the SEC, you've got to have big bodies. You got to have guys that are 300 plus pounds to be able to go up against some of those massive offensive linemen that you're going to go up against in the SEC. But it also goes vice versa. If you're the Oklahoma Sooners, you've got to go out there and you've got to take a nice offensive line class. And I've said it, at least 4 or 5 guys, 4 or 5 offensive linemen, maybe more, because you're losing, I think it's 4 or 5 guys, and you need to replenish every single one of them. And yeah, you're probably still going to have to take guys on top of those guys in the transfer portal, because you're going to need to get some experienced guys into this locker room, because you don't want your offensive line just to be sophomores and freshmen. Now, I will say this, Texas made it work. And I think Texas is going to have probably one of the most experienced and best offensive lines in the country for the next 2-3 years. So maybe Oklahoma puts themselves in that same position. I don't know. But all I know is, when it comes down to Williams Nwaneri, I think either him or David Stone could really shape and mold this class for Oklahoma. Because it's not just that, hey, Oklahoma got a 5-star defensive lineman. It's Oklahoma got a top 10 player, not a guy that was a 4-star and grew into a top 10 player. No, they landed a top 10 player that everybody in the country wanted, that was a top 10 player from the start. And I say that because they're also in the running for David Stone. You get a guy like Williams Nwaneri to commit to Oklahoma, or a guy like David Stone to commit to Oklahoma. It turns heads, and it makes recruits ask questions. Why? What's going on there? Why would he commit there? And then maybe they want to take a visit, and they want to see what's going on. Even though they're committed somewhere else, maybe you see this effect happen later in the season. But kids are curious. And when they see top 10 players commit to a place like Oklahoma on the defense, where Oklahoma hasn't been great, and Oklahoma just came off a 6-7 season, it definitely makes people ask questions. And I think it's worth noting, we're sitting here talking about Williams Nwaneri, David Stone on this defensive line, and Williams Nwaneri on the edge, and how elite Williams Nwaneri could be because he's so dynamic and could play both spots. We're completely skipping over the fact that Oklahoma has positioned themselves mighty fine for a top 4-star edge rusher in the country, in Danny Okoye, currently ranked 149 in the 247 composite. Oklahoma is positioning themselves well. And Oklahoma is doing what they need to be able to turn this thing around. So, guys, I want to hear from you. Do you guys think Williams Nwaneri is ultimately going to be in this 2024 class for Oklahoma? I know last time he was here at OU, there were a lot of people saying, well, I'm not going to say a lot of people, but there were a couple people saying, and you heard some rumors that maybe Williams Nwaneri was trying to shut it down. But ultimately, he ended up leaving campus, not committing. You almost have to wonder, if he was that close last time, could he be that close this time? Because an OV is a lot different than an unofficial visit. So maybe the staff could sprinkle out a little bit of extra of that Sooner magic onto this recruitment and maybe get him to commit just a smidge early. But guys, again, I want to hear from you. Jump down in the comments below. Let me know what y'all's thoughts are. Do you think Williams Nwaneri ultimately ends up in this class for the Oklahoma Sooners?